The long wait is over. Newcastle United 2, Liverpool nothing, and Toon Army for the first time in
Hey,
70
2-1, get it,
years.
baby.
The Toon
2-1.
Army have a domestic trophy. Luis Miguel Echegaray, LME, welcome to ESPN FC Live. We've got European Cup winner, of course, First Division winner, FA Cup winner 3 times, Stevie Nicol. We'll get to him and his commiseration in a second.
He can wait. He can wait.
FA Cup finalist, a member of Kevin Keegan's Newcastle United, who ended up second in the Premier League, and Shaka Hislop, a very happy man. Let's start with you. How are you feeling? Newcastle 2, Liverpool nothing. Your reaction, my friend?
2-1.
2-1.
Yes,
Yeah,
2-1. That's right. A million apologies. Federico Chiesa scores a goal on the late stages. Stevie Nicol's about to bite my head off. 2-1 to Newcastle United. That's right. But anyway, regardless, the statistic, the fact remains. For the first time in 70 years, Newcastle have a domestic trophy. Shaka Hislop, give me your reaction, my friend.
All right. So to answer your question about how I'm feeling a whole lot better now than I was 5 minutes ago. And then up until 5 minutes ago, my Sunday was going as good as I could hope. And then all of a sudden, as Liverpool, let me call you correct there, as Stevie continues to remind us, Chiesa grabs that goal and becomes a whole lot more uncertain. But listen, given everything that Newcastle has, or how long the wait has been, I don't want to say that Newcastle have endured, but how long the wait has been for arguably the best fan base, and I'm biased, the most loyal fan base, yes, I'm biased, in English football. It's well worth it, and the celebrations will go long into the week, let alone the night, and deservedly so. I think just in terms of, aside from the romantic of the day, over the course of 90 minutes, I thought Newcastle were the better. And I don't think there were reasons for that. But kind of given the heartbreak of exactly this cup 2 years ago, it's great to see Newcastle not only be back at the final, but finally win it. And deservedly so.
Yeah, and that's why we began with you. And yes, Stevie, thank you for reminding me that Federico Chiesa did get that goal, making it 2-1. At least it was that moment. But the most important thing here was obviously we begin with Newcastle United. And by the way, Eddie Howe, the first English manager to win a domestic title since Steve McLaren Middlesbrough in 2004. Newcastle United, by far the better team today. Stevie, let's focus on that. And what happened with Liverpool today? Is it as easy as to say the PSG hangover, the decision-making, Newcastle were just that much better? Well, give me your thoughts on this loss today.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of running out of steam. There's no question that Newcastle were the better side. It shouldn't have been as close, and Shaka shouldn't have been sitting on the edge of his seat for that last 5 minutes, because Newcastle had other chances that they probably should have scored. Keller made a couple of good saves. But the truth is, Liverpool didn't have the legs. I mean, Newcastle got everything right. They closed them high up the park the entire game, never let them breathe, never let them get into any sort of rhythm, and just physically owned them, quite frankly. And every time Keller had to go long, Dan Burn was always going to win every header against Jota or Salah or whoever it may be. And so Newcastle got this spot on. They didn't turn up to play silky soccer against Liverpool. They turned up to use that physical advantage, that extra juice in the legs. And I think the commentator pretty much summed it up. When you think about it, Liverpool's had 9 more games than Newcastle. So you imagine that's 9 midweeks without a game. That whole thing catches up with you. And I think there's no question that had a lot to do with it. But can't argue. The best team won. Newcastle should have won by more. And for Liverpool, they just need to now try and get some legs back and finish off the Premier League.
Yeah, because we talked about it earlier on. I mean, even before PSG, they weren't good against Southampton. Southampton were leading 1-0 in that game. So obviously those minutes catch up. But Shaka, let's begin with that first 45 minutes, because it was pretty much the blueprint for what we were going to see for the remainder. I mean, Stevie mentioned how Newcastle's strategy under Eddie Howe was really just like, look, let's Mike Tyson this, right? Everybody has a plan until you punch them in the face. Let's punch them in the face. Let's be direct. Let's be aggressive. Let's be physical in the air. And it began with the opener from Dan Burn, and it was coming. It wasn't just like a shocking, it was coming from every corner. What did you see from those first 45 minutes? And I guess that goal right in the 45-minute from local man Dan Burn.
Yeah, so I felt that if Newcastle were going to win this, they were going to have to deny Liverpool early on. I felt, well, or to the other side of that same coin, if Liverpool were going to win it, they would have to get a goal or two to the good in the opening 45. For all the reasons that Stevie just mentioned. Never mind the 9 more games, the 9 more midweek fixtures that Liverpool have had to play. They're off the back of 2 incredibly difficult games against PSG, who you can argue right now are playing some of the best football in Europe. Added to that, 120 minutes and a penalty shootout, how draining that is both physically and mentally. And I thought that would play a part. So I thought if Liverpool were going to win this, they would have to get a couple of goals early on. And Liverpool are sitting top of the Premier League table for a reason. It was not beyond them to do exactly that. But I thought Newcastle did more than just a good enough job in denying them. I can't think of too much that Pope had to do in the first 45. For large spells, I thought Newcastle dominated not just the midfield, but the fact that it stayed in it for as long as it did was because of simply how good Liverpool were at the back, and in particular, Konate and Van Dijk. And then all of a sudden, the set piece. And I've never been a fan of zonal marking. Why it is McAllister somehow finds himself on Dan Burn is beyond me. It was not for the first time, I'll have to say. Dan Burn won another header earlier on from a set piece over McAllister that Guimaraes tried to flick on, but it ended up right in the arms of Kelleher. So you see it coming. And then all of a sudden that was a deal breaker. Or that kind of opened the game up a whole lot more. Newcastle started to play with more confidence. There started to be a little bit more room, kind of given the fact that Liverpool had to go looking for a goal. And that played into how much better I thought Newcastle were through midfield and the attacking third. Then the second goal, then a bit of a response very late on edge of the seat stuff. But truth be told, again, I thought Newcastle got it right. Liverpool had their issues coming into this one, as we both mentioned. But the better team, the overarching conclusion is the better team won.
The better team won. We've all said it. We all think it. Obviously, Arne Slot will admit it himself. But here's the thing, Stevie. After the first 45 minutes, Dan Burn gets his goal. Both teams get into the dressing room, and Newcastle are leading 1-0. So I guess my question to you, what are you thinking that Arne Slot should be doing here? Because the reason I ask is because when the second half begins, not only are we not seeing changes from Liverpool, as Shaka is mentioning, there's more push from Newcastle's side. There's a warning sign already from, Bruno Guimaraes standing in interference to play, even though, with that goal from Alexander Isak was taken away, and then eventually he gets his goal. I saw Liverpool as worse in the second half. Like they weren't getting better. What did you think was going to happen or should have happened, I guess, in the dressing room that you didn't see? Like, to me, do you agree with me? I thought it was the worst performance in the second half, even though Chiesa got that goal.
Here's the thing. Sometimes there's not an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's not an answer. The way the game was going, yes, you can argue right now, looking back, that maybe putting some fresh legs on, but then the problem is they don't have any fresh legs. So sometimes it's just not an answer. Liverpool at half time, in my opinion, I couldn't figure out how they were going to win this game. I couldn't figure out how they were going to get back in the game, because the way the game was going, Newcastle were not changing in the second half. Newcastle were always going to be pushing and getting in the face of Liverpool and making Kelleher play it long. And so even if you bring Núñez on to give yourself a bit of a target, but even when he came on, you saw that it never changed anything.
Yeah.
So I don't really think Arne Slot had any answers, because I don't really think there are any answers. The way this Liverpool side is right now, the way they're beat up, I mean, every challenge, Newcastle looked stronger. Every second ball, they were sharper to it. I mean, we can sit here and go through the whole game, and Newcastle, in every single facet of the game, were ahead of Liverpool. They were a step ahead in thinking, and they were a step ahead physically and in sharpness. So, I don't think Arne Slot can be held accountable for the second half performance, particularly because I don't think he had any cards to play. He really didn't.
I have to say, I totally agree, Stevie. You look at Liverpool's side, I thought Arne Slot had his best 11 out on the park. If you want to make changes, it almost felt as though it would be changes for change's sake, maybe just to get fresh legs on. But then Kaiser has been inconsistent all season long, and that's putting it as nicely as I can. And I know Kaiser got his goal in the end. Do you throw Darwin Nunez on? When having Darwin Nunez on is exactly what Newcastle want. It's exactly what the likes of Dan Burn, they are happier to see a Darwin Nunez on there than anybody else, because they will cope with the aerial and the physical threat of a Darwin Nunez better than anybody else on the park. So I'm 100% with Stevie here. I just don't think that there was much Arne Slot could have done to change things.
I guess I'll play devil's advocate here, because for the simple fact that I agree. I think that there were, when you are playing a cup final, you have to put out the best possible lineup to get the best possible result. But when context is needed, days after playing an intoxicating